obligated to do or not do. Also want to talk about where we are in the process, a little specifically, and some of the comments and the feedback we've gotten so far. I also want to talk a little bit about, as Tom alluded to, we're starting some preliminary alternative development. I want to explain that part of the process. And more related to the purpose of tonight's workshop, I want to start to cover a little bit, introduce some of the criteria that we're looking at to screen and get to a point of looking at some of those alternatives and get your inputs on that. And then we'll move into a little intro on what the exercise will be, and then we'll launch into it. So just for a starting point, as Tom mentioned, we're developing an environmental impact statement, and it's for the resolution copper mine, proposed operations, general plan of operations, and there's that land exchange component. And so it's part of the National Environmental Policy Act. So one of the first things we need to do is be very clear on what we're doing, what is our purpose, and what is the need for the project. And so we've got those two. There are two aspects of that purpose and need. And so, and it's very specific, and again, it's related to the existing mining laws and other environmental laws and regulations that the Forest Service follows. And that's to consider it's to consider approval of that proposed plan. And it does, that mining plan of operations, we're dealing with that surface estate, the stuff on top of those federal lands, not necessarily what's below. And with that, there's a term, it's the reasonably incident to extraction, transportation, and processing of that copper and molybdenum. And so we're going to talk about a little bit some of those pieces of the proposal and what that includes. But that's part of that decision framework. So we're looking at that environmental review of those aspects. And then the other piece, that's part of the National Defense Authorization Act 2015, that's related to some specific language in Section 3003, and that relates to Congress telling the Forest Service you're going to exchange some lands on behalf of the United States with resolution copper. And that piece of it isn't subject to a NEPA analysis because Congress passed that, but we are going to be also looking at the effects of that parcel that's being exchanged. And that would be the oak flappers. So there's some, as far as a framework for the process when we're doing this environmental review, the Forest Service, we have some obligations. It's part of our fulfilling our mission and role as a federal organization. First and foremost, we're involving the public. That's you. And so there's a couple pieces in the process, and I'll show a schematic here in a little bit. As far as that public involvement, we start out with scoping, which is at the front end of the process, and that's where we try and identify issues and concerns. Another big piece of the whole environmental review process is to develop technically feasible alternatives, and that's about where we're at right now. And those alternatives are designed to address the issues and concerns that we're hearing from the public and internally and from cooperating agencies about the proposed action. And then the other big piece of it, which tends to take the longest amount of time, is to actually analyze those alternatives. And part of that is being able to assess what those actions are, what the consequences are, and what those impacts are in terms of what's foreseeably going to happen based on what's being proposed. So, taking a quick look at the overall big picture schedule. We've completed scoping, and I've got a couple slides we're going to talk about that. So where we are right now is in the alternatives development stage. And we kind of switched gears there from scoping into alternatives development this winter. And we're going to be in that phase for a bit. I'm going to talk more about that in some slides. Then the next step will be conducting the analyses and then disclosing those effects and publishing the draft EIS. We expect that to happen in summer of 2019, so that's 2 years out right there. And then beyond that, there'll be a public comment period on that draft. We'll take a look at that feedback, make modifications, put out a final EIS, and come up with a draft decision. We expect that to happen in spring of 2020. Then, because we're a Forest Service agency, we also have an objection period when that draft decision comes out, and that's another opportunity for the public to be involved in terms of expressing what you think about the decision. We resolve that and then get to a final record of decision. So down the road, we're looking at fall of 2020 for getting this done. So I mentioned we have completed the scoping process. That started a while back. Before we actually put out the notice of intent, I know there was conversations and information gathering and outreach with some of the stakeholders. But the primary period for scoping was March of 16 through July 2016, a 120-day period. And during that time, there were also 5 public meetings, similar to this one, and using this venue as a matter of fact. And during that time, we collected over 130,000 letters and comment types of submissions. 130,000. Now, the majority of those were actually form letters. So, but those were considered. And by definition of a form letter, it was basically the same statement over and over and over again. And so when that happens, we take that information that's contained in that form letter, those comments, and they get counted once. So they don't get counted hundreds of thousands of times. It's not a vote. I want to point out that we did hear and receive over 1,200 unique letters. And on any given letter, there can be 10 to 20 pages or more, and many, many comments. So we've taken those into consideration. When we sliced and diced all of that, it turned out in our database we had over 6,900 sort of individual comments. So that's pieces of information that we're considering and trying to synthesize. And therefore, we then developed, looked at those, categorized it, and published our scoping report. And it's over 300 pages. But we were able to put that out on our project website just a couple weeks ago now, March 10th. And it is available, so if you haven't had a chance to look at it and see if your comments have been captured, I would encourage you to do so. So in general, okay, so there's 330 some pages on the scoping report. Just to kind of really narrow it down for tonight's purposes, we heard a lot of things, but in general terms, these were some of the most common topics we heard about. And you should see those reflected in the scoping report, whether it was captured as part of a public meeting or just public comments that were submitted. But in general, socioeconomic effects, there's positive and negative concerns related to those. A lot of concern is the subsidence that's expected to occur at Oak Flat. Also, just threats to public health and safety from some of the mining operations, or maybe downstream from the proposed tailings location. We heard about your concerns about impacts to surface and groundwater, tribal and cultural resources, scenery resources and open space, and all kinds of biological, physical resources, wildlife habitat, those kinds of topics. Also, we heard about the concern about loss of recreational opportunity. And again, for tonight's purposes, we also heard a lot about location and design of the tailings storage facility. So I want to drill down a little bit tonight. So if you were here, if you were at last night's meeting, this is some new slides. We wanted to kind of highlight, I guess, some of the specific comments we heard about tailings storage facilities. So what we heard and what we received in the comments are some requests about investigating alternative tailings locations, and some of them were specific. For instance, Arizona Trust State Land parcel in the Superstition Vistas, as well as the BLM and state land at the base of the mountain just west of Gonzales Pass and south of US Highway 60. There were also suggestions to transport mine tailings by rail to a safer alternate tailings location. The current proposal has it going about 5 miles by pipeline. We also heard about suggestions to use existing and future mine pits, use private land for disposal, to use a brownfield site. Some of those are out there. Focusing a little more on tailings storage facility design. We heard things like construct the tailings storage facility using safer downstream construction design rather than upstream construction design. Well, some of that's really technical, we get that, but we have a team of folks that specialize in mining engineering and mining operations and design engineers. We've also heard considered, again, different types of tailings, filter and dry stack. We heard to evaluate filter versus and paste tailings as part of that design. And then, again, more and more in terms of some mitigations, include under drains, line the tailings storage facility and potentially those areas that would be acid generating material, and to investigate alternative long-lasting liner materials. So we can use these as mitigations or modifications to the proposed. And then, so it goes on. Anyway, just to try and give you a flavor of that, we'll have some more discussion on that tonight. Okay. So what do we do with all of these comments then? It's one thing to stand up here and talk about it and throw it back at you, but the whole purpose is to get an understanding of your relationship to the federal lands, in this case the Tonto National Forest, as well as some of the other private land locations for the mining operations. You might live right next to it, some of the proposed facilities. And so from that, from these scoping comments, we're trying to establish those, a range of issues. So these are things that we have concerns and problems with what's being proposed, and to address them in depth in the EIS analyses. So that's one way we use these comments. Also, we use them to identify mitigation or particular modifications to the current proposal, and then we could evaluate that. Or as it warrants itself, and we're in that preliminary stage, to construct alternatives to the proposal that address or meet or satisfy the concerns raised. And that's probably the most challenging part. So just to kind of do a quick overview, a little more about alternatives. What are alternatives? According to the Council on Environmental Quality, alternatives are the heart of the environmental review. It can really affect the analyses that are done, and downstream from that, the decisions that are made. And so, again, the purpose is to resolve or address key issues. And, but with that in mind, we're still trying to develop alternatives that meet that original purpose and need for the project. So again, we're looking at a mine proposal, and it's got various pieces. It's got the place where the mine, the ore body's extracted. It's got the tailings portions. It's got processing facilities, transportation corridors, those kinds of things. And then, last but not least, we need to be consistent in the alternatives need to be consistent in terms of the overall land management policies and laws that we are sort of constrained by, if you will, and we need to be working within that range. Okay, so dialing us back into here we are with the Resolution Copper General Plan of Operations. What are we talking about when we're talking about the alternatives for this EIS? So we can break them into kind of three categories. There's the proposed action, so that is one alternative that we look at. And then there's the no action alternative, as we call it, and that's considered the status quo. Status quo in the sense that we use it for a relative comparison, as if there was no mining or land exchange involved. And we use it to compare the proposed action with the baseline and then with the other alternatives. And these other reasonable alternatives, again, we're in a stage where we're just starting to look at developing those, and that's why we've tried to, we want to be coming out in front of the public, in front of you all, and get your input and help to kind of get at that better decision and look at what matters most to folks in the communities that are most going to be affected by this proposal. So I've got a few more slides, and just to kind of, since we're going to be talking about tailings and stuff, wanted to kind of do a very quick overview of the project, and it's very short, but we're basically talking about four pieces, four aspects or components of the mine, and I'll show a map a little bit, but we've got what they call, what we're referring to in the plan of operations as the East Plant Site, and that's where the ore body is located, and where they'll be extracting underground and conveying the ore over to the West Plant Site, and that's where they're going to be actually processing and crushing, creating more of the ore concentrate, and then also, as proposed, pumping tailings onto the tailings site. There's a thing called the Marco Corridor, and that's a right-of-way, there's a rail line, and it's going to be used for a couple things, to convey water. It's got a loadout facility on it, and a filtering plant, and it's got electrical and, like I said, water coming and going in pipelines. And then also the other aspect of it is the actual tailings storage facility. And again, that's the area where the mine leftovers, the tailings are going to be placed wherever, I guess. It's where they end up. So, and this map's in your, there's a 4-page handout. So again, just for quick reference, the East Plant Site and the ore body, Oak Flat, and the proposed subsidence for the underground and mining will occur over here, number 1. And then the processing facilities, this is number 2, and that's in the community of Superior. Number 3 is the pipeline for the tailings. 4 is the tailings storage location currently proposed. Item 5 is this Marco Corridor. And then 6 is the loadout facility. Again, just kind of general reference there. Okay. So, we've talked a little bit about the framework that the Forest Service is working under. We've received the proposed action. We have to evaluate it and consider the environmental ramifications of approving it. We're looking at, we've scoped to collect some initial impressions from the public about what's most important. And we're starting to now develop alternatives so that we can dive further into the analyses. So when we're developing preliminary alternatives, we do get guidance on the federal regulations and then from the Council on Environmental Quality. And so these criteria that we're talking about for screening and evaluating alternatives kind of fall into these 4 categories. Again, we need to be meeting the purpose and need. We also have to consider things to be, from an engineering standpoint, they need to be technically feasible. And so there's a lot of calculations and design aspects that those numbers are cranked, and we have to kind of run it through and make sausage with it. Another aspect is, we have to assess the costs associated with these different alternatives, different pieces and parts. and show those comparatively. And then we also are looking at the environmental and social factors. And again, these are those issues and concerns raised by the public in terms of effects. And so if there's concerns about downstream water quality or proximity to communities, we want to be looking at that and see if we can design an alternative that would address those aspects. So, as has been mentioned a couple times tonight, and I'll say it again because I think it bears repeating. We're at the front end of the Forest Service team that's conducting the environmental review. We've started to pull together pieces to, now that we've got some initial input on scoping, concerns from the public, we're starting to look at these types of items in building those alternative packages. So we are looking at mining techniques. So right now what's proposed is that block cave mining. That's an underground process. It's not a cut and fill, but we are looking at those other mining techniques. And so when we say we're looking at those, we're investigating aspects in terms of the ore body, the location. Is it technically feasible to mine that ore body in another manner? And so we're digging into that, and we'll be looking at those to the extent that we can. Another aspect is, again, the type of tailings. What's proposed right now is aqueous. So we're looking at wet stuff versus dry stuff, and there's different implications for that in terms of the size and the location and the conditions that those tailings would be subject to over time, and then in terms of other environmental contingencies, earthquakes, possibilities for dam breaks associated with the tailings. So again, we're pulling those together. Again, also just the facility design type, again, the dams and how you access it. We do one location, we do several small tailings construction areas. So again, what's been proposed is just one option. We're also looking at considering, is there other ways to move the stuff, whether it's the ore or the tailings, and we'll see. Again, very preliminary. And then relocation of filter processing facilities. There's a piece right now that's located on the Marco corridor, and there's been some discussion that there might be the possibility of moving that up to Superior. Again, very preliminary. We're looking at options. So then the last one then is the tailings storage facility locations, and that's kind of what's the focus for tonight. So, again, kind of touching back on the scoping report and what we heard, in terms of the importance of what might happen, what the potential impacts are from any tailings, wherever they're located. They could be affecting these types of resources out on federal lands or private lands or whatever. And so this is what we heard from you, these types of broad topics, and we'll go into some more definitions later in the workshop. But we identified these 6 topics, and they are on your handouts as well. But cultural resources, proximity to existing communities, recreation resources, scenery, streams and springs and all things water, and wildlife habitat. Okay, so I'm about to finish here. This is my last slide. So again, the reason that the Forest Service is here tonight in front of you is we're very interested in getting some additional insights from you on what matters as we're starting to pull together these alternatives. And in particular, we thought it would be meaningful to focus on the tailings locations because it's something that, because they're proposed on the federal lands and they affect how we manage those federal lands, it affects how you might use or live near those federal lands. we thought that this would be a meaningful topic to focus on, as opposed to maybe mining techniques. So that's why we put that out front for the topic of discussion. But we are interested in your input and your values. And then we do, so last night's meeting, tonight's meeting, and then for the next 10 days, starting tomorrow, again online, we want to collect some insights about how we can move forward in looking at tailings and effects to those resources, and use that to help us come up with better alternatives that'll help us get to a hard, but hopefully better, more equitable decision. With that, I'll turn it over to Margaret.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. So if you all are